Hi everybody, I'm Bob Marshall from LakeCAM, and I'm here with Dave Davenport, who is one of our school committee representatives. He's also a parent of two children in the system and a resident of Lakeville, and also our interim superintendent, Dr. Jessica Heisinger. And just a little notice here at the beginning, if any of you would like to add to this information in some other program, whether you're in favor or against, please contact us at lakecam.tv or 774-213-9594, and we'll provide you with an opportunity to address those issues. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, please, you should all understand that I spent 36 years as a teacher in the Freetown Lakeville school system. With all of that said, Dave, what is the amount of the override request and when is this election?
Well, the amount that the Board of Selectmen approved was $1.5 million. And that will, if approved by ballot, the total district budget would be $33,095,000. And the election itself is coming up on May 18th, which is a Saturday.
Okay, very good. So 1.5 million is the figure, and it's Saturday, May 18th.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Why do we need this override?
So I'll talk a little bit
Sure.
to that. You know, one thing I try to do is find some common ground with everyone, right? And I think that everyone in the Lakeville community believes in maintaining a quality community. So what is quality, right? Let's define that as. Is quality, you know, having a scenario where your police department the station is aging? Is a quality community where your town offices can't afford to put windows in and replace them? Is a quality community a situation where your public works department doesn't have a public restroom? Is a quality community one that supports schools of students of 38 in a classroom? So what is quality is my first question to that. And then another thing that I think of when I think, why do we need this override? You know, we've come to a place in Lakeville where we have a revenue situation that it's not about the schools alone anymore. It's not about simply funding the schools. And if we continue down this path, we're not going to be able to meet the legal mandated obligation of net school spending of the towns. And what will happen then, if the towns cannot meet their legal obligation to fund the schools according to law, it is going to then dip into the town services. So already the aging police station, the difficult situation at the Public Works Department, the aging roads situations that they have, that money, we are going to have to then go and get it from those public services, police, fire, public works, library services, senior services, because there is a minimum net requirement that the towns must meet.
When you say we would have to dip into those, who is the we? Would it be the state that would mandate that, or
Yes.
are you simply talking town meeting or what have you?
have to find that money somewhere, and it isn't there anymore because both the towns have a revenue problem and the schools, because we're a department of the towns, we also have a revenue problem. So this isn't just a school issue. It's a town-wide issue, and I think that that's what people need to know. People who don't have children in school, this will affect them. People who feel like I've paid for the schools before. This will affect their livelihood. Services that they rely on for public safety, for just health and human services, for just basic needs that they have, this will begin to impact because there is a legal requirement to fund the schools at a net minimum amount. Not to mention just the quality of your educational system, which affects property values, which affects the desire for people to want to come and live in your community, which is one of the first things that people ask when they're looking for housing, is they ask, how are the schools? Young people in the age range of in mid-20s to mid-40s and early 50s, they ask, how are the schools? So we need to think about those things. Simply, we don't have the funds to adequately keep our schools running at level service or even below level service. And the alternative is a complete decimation of the school system and all of the wonderful things that are happening here.
We'll talk about that decimation in just a moment. Did you have anything that you wanted to add to that, David?
Well, what's going to happen, and it might take care of one of your next questions, is if the override didn't pass, that 1.5 million amount really comes in two pieces. About 340,000 is required just to meet minimum requirements set by the state that Lakeville doesn't have to begin with. So if somebody really hasn't heard much about the override yet, or maybe just a little, one of the things that they might have heard is that Lakeville can't balance its budget without some kind of override or some kind of funding that Lakeville hasn't identified yet.
Is that 340 just the Lakeville portion of
Yeah,
that?
I'm strictly talking
Okay,
Lakeville right
yeah,
now. Of that
okay.
1.5 million, about 340,000 is just to get to the state set minimum requirement. So if the override fails, that 340 roughly $1,000 is still going to have to be found somewhere, and the vehicle to find that is going to be on town meeting floor. And that's where some of these things that Jessica's talking about, like do we take half out of the fire department and half out of the police department? Do we take some here? We're going to have to make those decisions, you know, literally on town meeting floor.
But suppose town meeting floor doesn't decide to make those decisions, to take them from, and votes a lesser number. I think this is, I'm trying to get back to what I think I was hearing Jessica talk about a moment ago. What happens if that were to happen?
I don't know the answer to that because we'll be spending under state minimum, and I think the state can penalize us for that. We got a warning letter for being just a few thousand under, and it was really an accounting thing. We had some money carried forward from one budget to the next, and the letter had two parts to it. On the one hand, it said, you're slightly under your state requirement. We don't like this. You're not supposed to do this. And then it said, by the way, looking at your current year budget, you did make that amount up. So we kind of appreciate that you did that, and please don't do this again.
The state can
so
withhold Chapter 70 funding. If we
we
don't
repeat
meet
this.
our net minimum requirements, the states can withhold Chapter 70, and then you won't have any teachers here.
Which is really interesting logic, that if the community withholds meeting net school spending figures, the minimum amount, that the state then takes more away from you. I mean, that's the state's mechanism, correct?
The state then will not
Right.
provide.
They
their
withhold
end
Chapter
70
70
funding.
monies as a punishment. So if you don't spend up to that limit, you lose even more,
Yes.
is what you're saying. Okay,
Right.
thank you. All right, if this were to pass, what would the cost be to the average homeowner in Lakeville?
Okay, the selectmen did put out some numbers on that, and with an average home value of $290,000, the change to your tax bill would be about $309 a year. So obviously, if you own more property or property higher value, the amount's going to go up. Lesser value, it's going to go down. But that's the baseline average that has come through the selectmen.
Okay, and again, I think you've kind of answered this, but if there's anything that we need to add to it, if this does not pass, does the district just cut its budget and Lakeville town budget is complete, or what's that mechanism on town meeting floor again? What would be attempted to have happen?
Well, I mean, you've been to probably many more town meetings even than I have, and I haven't seen one like this where you're cut short and you have to start dipping into other situations. I think you have in this town in the past, but you know, in order to meet state requirements, if Lakeville at current projections is $340,000 roughly short, then that money is going to have to be found in other departments. And you know, anybody at that town meeting would be free to step up and make a motion as to where that money would come from. it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. And the outcome may very well be, I mean, I'm no fortune teller, but if this override fails and we go through all of that turmoil at town meeting, we may find ourselves sometime in August trying to do an override again to put back in place, you know, the police officer or the fireman or whatever service was cut in order to patch things together at that time. So a chain of events will start happening that certainly going to be time consuming for the town and very, very wasteful in terms of just trying to go on with our town's business.
And I'm no town historian because I haven't been here that long, but I do know that would be a repeat of history, right? So back in 1993 when the major override was voted down, they had to go into police and fire, and there was a lot of turmoil, and they wound up having that summer override, that second override, which passed because it was terrible. It was a terrible town situation.
We had one fire, as my recollection was, we had one fireman on per shift. We had one police officer per shift, and some shifts, from what I understand, had nobody other than a dispatcher in the office. Don't take that to the bank, but that's my recollection, and it was quite bad.
Right.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Why does it have to be an override this year? I mean, you've addressed some of the funding issues and so forth. What prevents us having one? I know nothing legally prevents us, but why won't we just have one this year and next year and the year after and so forth? What's to prevent that?
Well, for one thing, why this year? If I could, you know, dial back the clock for you here right now, the last override, I didn't support the last override. I'm not by nature someone who wants to have an override. I don't really think anybody on the committee, although I'm not speaking for the committee, is saying, "Gee, let's have an override." It's so
Are you
much
talking about the technology?
No, I'm talking about.
That was a debt
I'm talking about
exclusion.
3 years ago.
Okay.
We had an override
Okay.
for school, combination of school and some town things, and it did not pass. Anyhow. And while I'm not representing the committee, I don't think there's anybody on the committee that is, you know, just wanting an override just to have an override. Like, that's a great fun thing to do. We're just in a situation where, you know, Lakeville hasn't really come back from, you know, 5 or 6 years now of a poor economy. It's ongoing. Things such as Cisco have come and gone. You know, people in town made their decisions on that. There hasn't been a lot of economic growth. It just hasn't been happening for us. You know, we're in partners with Freetown. Freetown has done a little bit better. They're not in a position, they're feeling that they need to have an override, and they're awaiting the outcome of what's happening in Lakeville. And they will, you know, they will do what they need. They will do what they need to do depending upon Lakeville's outcome. But Lakeville, in particular, at this time, just doesn't have the revenue, even to cover, you know, the basic budget that the state mandates. So we do need it this year. When we first regionalized, our net budget combined of the 3 towns went down by $500,000. In the following year, it went up marginally, maybe $100,000 or something of that sort, about 0.5%. You know, so the first year, was it 0.1%?
Yeah,
okay. So it was minus 1.5% when we regionalized. So we saw some savings. The second year was essentially flat. This year, including the override, it's roughly a 5% increase that's being requested. So if you average out those 3 years, you're looking at the district creeping up at about 2% per year.
So what's creating that additional expense in between? I know that eats up all that money. I guess would be.
So you have increases in healthcare costs.
Sure.
You have increases in disability. You have increases in Bristol County retirement. We've had increases in that. We've actually taken on, when we regionalized, we took on those teachers. We've taken on elementary building insurances.
And I'm sure the town said thank you.
Yeah. Yes, they plowed for us this year. But no, it's just that the costs have continued to go up, you know, disability insurance. So, you know, when you, and just basic steps and levels and just fair contracts that we've had to negotiate with our teachers. So there's been cost increases. So what we're seeing is our budget has been going down, our costs have been going up, and we are still just been hanging on like good soldiers, doing the very best we can, taking cut after cut after cut, year after year. And if you look back to 2009 when the first override went down, Assawamsett alone, that one building, lost $1 million, over 22 staff gone. And they moved on, and they continued to provide the best education they could with over 30 students in a classroom. Our special ed numbers skyrocketed, went significantly up. Even at the middle school, we're still feeling the effects of those large special education numbers again, because we did not effectively and adequately provide students an education during that time. And then the next year, we took another cut, and then we regionalized, and as Dave said, we took a $500,000 cut. So over the course of time, you're looking at our school district, whether it was 3 different regions or a full region, has been cut almost $2.5 million. And since 2008, we are looking at significant cuts. So why do we need the override now? I mean, we've gone down to the absolute bare bones. These communities have said, we want you to find every efficiency you possibly can. We want transparency. We have gotten to the point where we have lived on savings. We have lived on every efficiency we could possibly do. We have cut to the bare bones of administration, to the bare bones of teaching, of offerings at this high school. There's nowhere else to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and on
Dave?
top of that, also over the last few years, there was some federal, stimulus money, or, some of those programs that
Right.
came through. Those have dried up, and those things are great while they last, but don't get used to them, because when they're gone, you have to replace that funding, or you have to cut. And that's what's happened. That's all gone away now. So that's the danger of doing that in the first place. And the most recent year, we had an amazingly mild winter. I mean, everybody loved it around here. I didn't take my snowplow out once, and the school ended up benefiting to the tune of almost $550,000 in savings from oil. And that's a wonderful thing, but we've applied it to our operational budget. We just weren't able to do something like put it in E&D for a rainy day or use it for capital items. So when you take an opportunity like that, which in better times maybe we would have used for capital items or in a different way, and you use it just to keep your operations going, the next year you have to replace that $550,000 from somewhere. We're not going to have warm winters. This winter was more typical, or maybe even a little bit on the harsh side.
But the one before was really light.
Right. So we're not seeing that kind of savings in oil this year. So you have to, it's a great benefit one year, but then you have to replace it, and all of these things are kind of coming to a head this year. People have been talking about the cliff for well over a year now, and that's where we're at.
So in a sense, the federal government more or less avoided that cliff, but it's here in Lakeville is what you're saying.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all on us.
Which, just a moment ago there in your response, you reminded me of something that's in my next question. What impact, in your opinion, have these state unfunded mandates had on our budgets now, over the years, et cetera? As somebody who's been on a Old Colony School Committee for many years, until recently, this was an issue that bothered me a great deal, that the state would, you say things are good for a while when the federal government gives you this, that, or the other, but they don't last, and the need does, and so on and so forth. What impact do these state unfunded mandates have on our budget, our system?
So there's 3 major mandates right now that we are kind of dealing with as a system that are very expensive, but we don't have really the funding to implement them. The first one is the teacher evaluation system and the new administrator evaluation system, which on average takes about 300 to 400 hours a year for one administrator to execute. Now, I want the public to think about 300 to 400 hours for one person. Remember, we have one elementary principal in each building, no assistants, no help with evaluations. We have one principal over at Grace for over 480 students. We have a middle school principal with one assistant with over 890 students, and then we have a high school with 2 assistant principals. There's no coordinators who help with evaluations. This is all on our principals. Other school districts, you'll find assistant principals or coordinators or some sort of support to help them with that. So now think about that one person is having to do this amount of paperwork. So they're not able to do other things like be out and visible, be with kids, deal with some of the fires, the issues, you know, develop connections with the community, get back to parents in a timely fashion. These are the strains that our administrative team faces here. This is an unfunded mandate that is on us that takes an inordinate amount of time. You know, I have administrators, some of them are doing the work of 2 people. That other school systems, I mean, we're talking 80, 90 hours a week, which is very difficult. That's one unfunded mandate. The next one is even more wild. It's called retail. And retail has to do with English language learners. Now, we have a total of 4 of them in our district, but we are required that all of our staff get trained in the new WIDA system of being able to serve as English language learners.
By that term, English language learners, I think I know what it means, but would this be someone who doesn't have English as a primary language?
Yeah,
Is that
so English is a second language, or they come from a home where English is a second language. So we have legally mandated requirements to service those children, and now all teachers are going to have to be trained, whether or not the district has an inordinate amount of students of that population. They have to be trained and able to service those
and
kids.
whether or not those teachers have those students in their
Exactly.
classrooms.
Exactly. So that's the second one. The third one is the Common Core, right? So we have this new Massachusetts frameworks called that are based on the Common Core, which was adopted by many states across the nation, which is requiring new textbooks, new resources and materials, us to develop curriculum that's aligned to it. We also have a new assessment system coming in 2014, which much of it is going to be done online, which is one of the biggest reasons I made the pitch for the new technology infrastructure, because we are going to be required to be able to assess our students 3 times a year online as a part of this new PARC assessment.
3 times a year they're going to be
there's
tested?
formative assessments, and then there's an end-of-year summative assessment. So there's multiple changes happening across the state.
I'm just thinking about the time out of classroom, out of learning in the classroom from that much time on testing, which really doesn't have to do with this topic, but I'm kind of amazed, to
Yes.
be honest with you.
And again, I mean, it's different than MCAS. I mean, MCAS will take you an entire week where you're losing an entire week. PARC is
Right.
going to be a little bit different, but again, it is going to be a whole different format. And we don't have the staff. I know that I've heard this many times in the community. I heard it last night. Oh, we're so administrative heavy. We have a lot of administrators. We really don't. We are so thin on administration here. And with all of these new mandates, it makes it even more difficult to really service kids and to be with kids and to spend time with kids and with teachers when all of these things are shifting and changing. We have new laws for discipline coming that we're going to be required to implement this year. We have the bullying law that requires an inordinate amount of paperwork for investigating bullying issues. So there's a lot going on statewide, and I don't think people understand that over the course of time, how the responsibilities that the schools are required to take on, many of those things that were done in the home 50 years ago, 60 years ago, so many of that health, social, and human services, they're happening in schools now. And it may take an administrator an entire day to deal with an issue that took 5 minutes 15 years ago.
Yeah.
One thing that I would add for unfunded mandates is depending upon the outcome of this override ballot, there may be another unfunded mandate that we're looking at, and the communities will be creating this themselves. When we regionalized, regardless of your position on regionalization, and full disclosure, I didn't support regionalization, but
Neither did I.
we're regionalized now, And, you know, some good things have come out of it, and we've struggled to get some things hammered out, but we're moving forward, or trying to. But one of the major promises in regionalization was to lower elementary class sizes. That probably above anything else is what resulted in the districts regionalizing it. It was the primary issue. So in order to lower those class sizes, the hiring or the staffing requirement was 10 teachers. So give or take roughly, you know, 10 teachers, including benefits and whatnot, roughly $500,000. Salary, benefits, everything rolled into one. So that has to come from somewhere. You know, initially there was some shifting from the high school to elementary schools, but you can't keep doing that forever. I mean, you have to realize that if you wanted something to be a certain way, and then you make it a certain way, and it has that impact for cost, you have to sustain that cost. You know, so if the override does fail and class sizes go back up, then it won't be an unfunded mandate because we won't fulfill regionalization anymore. So that's what'll happen. If we do keep those class sizes low, it's going to hurt us somewhere else. And essentially, it's an unfunded mandate that the town asked the district to do certain things, and then, you know, won't support it funding-wise. So that's another one that, you know, may or may not become an unfunded mandate, depending upon our outcome coming up.
Thank you. There was some fairly substantial money left over from last year's budget. I think it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which some have pointed to as an example of the schools always having or finding the money, so to speak. Can you talk about that leftover money, and does it represent some kind of slush fund as we all hear around town?
Sure. Right about now, I wish there was a slush fund. I do. I mean, you know, it's not easy being on school committee. I don't really care that it's a thankless job, or, you know, you hear that enough. And you know, as a group, we've been a little bit odd over the past year. Okay, I'll spot you that. Yeah. But
I vote for that. Yes.
But if we had a slush fund, you'd see it in certain ways. The money that became controversial because it was there was largely that heating, that oil money that we talked about a little bit earlier. If you can imagine, you know, being a business manager for this district, or just scale it down to your house for a minute, my house. You know, my house is like 2,400 square feet or something like that. And, you know, a year ahead, I can't predict plus or minus $500 or $600 where my heating bill is going to be. It can vary a lot depending upon the price of oil and how the winter is. Well, I asked a couple of questions, and this district, all told, the 5 buildings, there's 660,000 square feet that's being heated. There's also outdoor lighting, you know, and electrical, but just sticking with the oil. Now, you've got a business manager who has to plug in a figure to a budget line. He's negotiating an oil contract a year ahead of time. Who knows what the oil price is going to be during the winter? And he's not a weatherman, you know, or else we'd include that in his title, and he probably has to be paid for it. So you've got all of these things, and then you have a winter that's incredibly mild. Now, no business manager, I imagine, I've never had the job myself and I never will, but I imagine that no business manager wants to cut a line like that so tight that if it's a cold winter, all of a sudden that line is short, and he's coming hat in hand saying, we're going to have to pull money here and pull money here in order to pay the oil bill. That would be a business manager who'd be worrying about his job. So, you know, probably oil lines in all school districts aren't, you know, razor thin right out of the gate. So you add that to a very mild winter, and yeah, we ended up with about $550,000. We prepaid SPED tuitions, special education tuitions, into the next year to immediately make use of that money in operations, because we don't have the slush fund. We just don't have it. You know, I think of it another way. You know, I was thinking, how do I explain that? I mean, I didn't want to sit in front of this camera and say, you know, support the override for the kids. I mean, that's certainly an extremely important message, but I was thinking about how how do you tell when an institution like this is needing some help? And, you know, something happened this winter. It was the blizzard. The vehicles that we had to clear the lot, they broke down. We've got no budget to, we just don't have any money in maintenance to repair them. You know, Bob Souza, who's probably one of the biggest unsung heroes in this district, is literally having his staff tear down 2 trucks to create one that will run. The Lakeville plowed the lots for us, you know, which was a wonderful thing. And, you know, when you see something like that happen, you start to understand that the slush fund or the always having the money isn't there. I mean, you know, when you look in your neighborhood and you've got somebody who's doing well, good job, and all that sort of stuff, what do they have in their you know, in their driveway? They usually have a pretty nice looking car, you know, nice model and whatnot. We're cobbling together 2 15, 17-year-old trucks into one to try to have something that'll plow for next year. If we had that kind of money laying around, trust me, we'd have better vehicles. You'd see some of those things sprinkled around the district. We just don't have it. You know, the big thing that we found about a year ago, we found about $200,000 in various funds that had gone dormant over time, some of them as much as 15 years. It's a terrible thing. They kind of got lost in the woodwork and all, but we found that money. We put it to use. Trust me, after something like that got found, everybody in the school committee wanted to be the person making the next find, including our business manager. Everybody was on the hunt. Oh, there must be more. You haven't heard about any more money. I mean, it's just not there.
Right. If I could just add one thing, I know that last year the initial budget proposal that John McCarthy had put forth included that out-of-district special education tuition. And at that time as well, Lakeville and Freetown did not have the money to really help us to get much more over net minimum. I think that we wound up coming to about $218,000 above net minimum. So we had to cut $535,000 out of the budget from somewhere. And we had this mild, incredible winter. And so we had to prepay that money. The only reason the state didn't cite us this year, we were so close to net minimum last year, 1.4% above net, that had we not used that money this year, we would have been out of compliance and our Chapter 70 funding would have been at risk because we are so close to that net. And so we had to use that towards this year because we would have not met the minimum requirement. Does that make sense?
I hear you. Yeah.
So, you know, it's important that the public understand, you know, we had this money, but we had to use it towards special education services. If not, that would have been 10 teachers there, right there. Right. And we would have had enormous class sizes this year at the elementary levels.
And along that line, and back to your point, I think you made earlier, David, some of the complaint, and I believe I heard one of our selectmen make this at a school committee meeting when you met with the board. I believe I heard this, talking about how the money got found and then it got used to hire, it was either 4 or 5 teachers. In the fall, there was some objection on this selectman's part to that. Can you speak about that? Why were those teachers hired? Why was the money used that way? Sure. Yeah.
So that one, I think what happened was that's kind of a separate issue. Over the summertime, mid-July, probably early August, we were notified by the state that our transportation reimbursement came in a little higher. And over the summer, you remember, there had been a lot of discussion about music.
I do remember, yes.
Music and a strong push in the community from parents that we really felt that the arts were being neglected at the elementary school. So that was one position that I brought to the school committee to consider with the higher transportation reimbursement money that came in. The next thing that happened in September is when we got to school, we realized that we had some class sizes at the middle school, upwards of 45 in a special. 45 children in a special, and with one teacher. We also had a situation where there were students who were being neglected or kept out of Algebra 1 because we didn't have the staff to provide them the level of math that they were capable of taking. So they were being put in a math that was beneath them, and that would affect them going into calculus as high school seniors. And so it was totally derailing them from really achieving their full potential.
I would imagine you might have heard from a parent or two on that one.
Quite a few parents. And so I brought those to the school committees. Number one, because they were safety concerns at the middle school, and number two is that it was impeding a child's ability to eventually reach the highest level of mathematics at the high school, which it would affect college competitiveness, college acceptance. So this was an important issue to parents and to me as an educator. So I brought it to the school committee and I said, we too have some funding that came in from transportation reimbursement. Would you consider this for safety reasons, for educational reasons? And they approved it.
Okay, well, I'd say that puts it to rest from my point of view. Thank you. All right.
I get a pass on that one. That's great.
The term level service budget has been used a number of times, and I remember watching you on some of the school committee meetings explaining how you redid the budget and so on and so forth. But a level service budget, as I understand it, is one that contains only the same services as the prior year, and cost increases would not be due to new programs, new expenditures, etc. Is this a level service budget, or is the reason for the budget because the budget is more than a level service?
I'd like to just say a level service budget, meaning if we rolled over the exact services this year into next year, would cost $800,000 more than what our currently voted budget number is. Okay?
Okay.
So what our budget is it is not a level service budget. It is a restructured program. Okay? So we have found we have done so well in providing intervention services for students that we have shifted money away from special education. So we don't have the need for as many special educators or the need for as many paraprofessionals. The town has asked us to look for every efficiency that we can find. So what we have done is we've been able to shift those to other places, such as teaching positions, such as coordination positions to help alleviate some of the evaluation, to provide support in technology, to begin utilizing this whole wonderful infrastructure that the town has invested in. We're able to restructure and reorganize, and it's costing less than what is level service budget, also maintaining less class sizes, lower class sizes than we had under the current level service budget. And the new incoming interim superintendent, who has 45 years in education, she looked at it and she said, wow, Jessica, this is impressive how you were able to restructure and reorganize for less money, and you're giving them a better program. So we're really proud of the budget that we've put together because it costs the community less and it's providing more services and more programs than we have in the past.
Okay, I have a question forming in my mind as you give that answer. I think I know the answer to it, but I'll throw it out there anyway because our viewers may be thinking of it. If you say that if we rolled last year's services into this year, it would be $800,000 more, and we're going for $1.5 million override, what's the extra $7 for?
Well, remember, we had that $535,000 of special education services.
Right.
We prepaid that. That is in our budget this year.
Okay.
Right? So we have that amount of money.
Yep, go ahead.
We have a lot of grants expiring.
Grants are expiring. That's right.
Yep.
The Schulman grant's expiring. The REAP grant's expiring. We have
The additional transportation reimbursement. Now, even if we get it, it's just part of the budget. It's not like that additional money that we got last year. That was a great unexpected thing, but even if we do get it this year, it's factored into the budget as is right out of the gate.
right. The CIC grant has expired as well.
CIC stands for?
Community Innovation
Okay.
grant has expired, and then we also have to think about our healthcare increased. Our steps and levels that we have to provide, our contractual obligations we have to provide, is another increase. So our costs are increasing, but we've actually, which is well above that, amount of money. That's the differential.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, the Lakeville Board of Selectmen, in discussing this issue just prior to their decision to move forward with a ballot vote, expressed concern that the school committee may just spend every penny of the override in some unsustainable fashion and come back for more next year. What's your response to that?
I was there for that meeting. My seat started feeling really warm while they were saying that. Mr. Powderly in particular had a lot of concerns over that. And you know what? Technically, they're correct. The school committee and the school district has a lot of autonomy. The money that the town gives to the schools can spend as they see fit. Now, we all want the school to spend responsibly and be a partnership with the town and all that. So on its face, because I think, I'm trying to remember, I think that talk was spurred by some questions from the audience. So John was responding to a question that was asked of him. But it's not my plan anyhow. I mean, we can't keep coming back and asking for more. I don't want to ask for this time. I don't have a lot of comfort saying, give us an override or anything. What I have comfort with is knowing that we need to fund the things that we've put forth. We're not packing this up with a lot of extras, hoping to get some things out of it. The budget that got put forth is lean. The programs that are adequate. They're not expansive. I mean, we didn't throw a lot of stuff in there, hoping to negotiate our way down to what we eventually thought we wanted, and that was refreshing this year. I mean, in the beginning of January, the budget was presented, and it pretty much was presented from then on in the same way. It never really changed substantially at all. The school put forth its priorities, and we've stuck with it. So, yes, the school committee could be irresponsible. That's a possibility. We are working on at least a 3-year financial plan to try to work with, Mr. Beliveau on the Board of Selectmen is looking for the schools to stay within a 3.5% increase over the next 3 years. As far as Lakeville's contribution would be concerned, I'm not sure if it would be exactly the same for Freetown. But at any rate, if we look at the past 3 years, where even if we get this override, the average increase in our district budget, all averaged in, is going to be about 2% per year. And we're being told you really need to live within 3.5%. And our initial forecasting for the next 3 years is that we think we can do about 2 to 2.5%. We can keep in about that 2% range. Well, I'm not sure quite how egregiously irresponsible we were in those prior years, because we've only been at about 2%, and we're going to be about 1% below what we're told we need to keep to in the future. At least that's our hope. So, I mean,
right, minus any things that happen with special education,
sure,
things that might happen.
Unfunded mandates.
Unfunded mandates. Right. But our historical, if you look back in history, as Dave said, we have been below the 2.5% or even this 3.5% that they've built into this override. So there is sustainability built in, which is really important for the public to know. There's sustainability in this project. And our history has shown that we have been very responsible with the amount of increases that have been made.
Relative to this issue, the topic of transparency often comes up, and as you were responding just a moment ago and talking about some of the selectmen who have had this concern and that concern, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the amount of participation from FinCom, boards of selectmen members, et cetera, and how their participation has either opened their eyes. I'm sure you don't want to speak for them, but how have they improved the communication and their understanding of what's going on in the school budgets? Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. Just some observations. You know, for one thing, Mr. Powderly and Mr. Beliveau in particular, they've attended a lot of school committee meetings
I've noticed.
over the past year. So just in that, we've had a lot more contact in our meetings. They've come to more of our meetings than I've gone to theirs. I feel bad about that. I've gone to a few, but not very many. And also the Regional Finance Committee. We had, I believe, 7 meetings, which was double the number of meetings that we had in the prior 2 years that the committee had been running. They were well attended. We met quorum every time easily, and usually had full attendance, both from Freetown and from Lakeville. And you know, that provided a lot of opportunity for the district and the towns to not understand each other, because we had a lot of those moments, and that's still ongoing. And you know, I think I didn't step backward fast enough because I'm the chairman of the finance committee again. I mean, I tried to, but it didn't work out that way. And so one thing that I'm looking to do, and I think the general school committee will probably be okay with, but it's up to them, is we want to try and change a little bit how that regional FinCom is working. And that may even require pursuing an amendment to the regional agreement, because in the regional agreement, the FinCom's purpose is to recommend a budget before the school committee takes a vote. We've never been able to do that, so we've always failed. And I think the design really sets us up for failure, because the town doesn't even really know its funding numbers yet. The district doesn't know its funding numbers yet, and yet the FinCom, in advance of the committee approving a budget, is supposed to create a recommendation. So you've got 2 towns, and you've got the district. Nobody knows what the other is capable of doing, what the final numbers
Dave,
are.
I have to say that this is kind of a somewhat aside, but when the issue of full regionalization came up, one of the reasons why I was opposed to it was because that segment was included in it, because I saw it as one more level of bureaucracy that wasn't going to work. I kind of predicted that, but I'm not happy that I was right. But
And what we're hoping that the FinCom might evolve into is more of a financial advisor and a planner, to try to work with the business manager in the district on the sustainability of the district. Not so much try to fight out over a budget annually, but try to look at the longer term and create some of that financial planning that I think is going to put some people at ease on all sides, because neither of the towns are particularly happy just handing over the amount of money that they have to do to the district just as a number, because this district is
the more
much larger than the towns.
that takes place prior to the school committee's vote has got to improve everybody's feelings, I would think.
And that's kind of was going to be my point. I think this year, from the very, very beginning, I spent a lot of time with Mr. Powderly, a lot of time with Mr. Beliveau, and with Mr. Maxey when he was on the Board of Selectmen, communicating, sitting down, trying to explain the complexities of a school system and its budget, because it's very different than towns. It's very different than other departments in the town, and there are things that I think communication this year has been very beneficial in providing us getting to this point.
Very good. Okay, why didn't full regionalization solve this district's budget problems? I know that there was at least a feeling a couple of years ago that budget problems were going to go away if we fully regionalized, if not actual statements. I don't think I ever heard anybody say that it was going to solve them, but I think there was a feeling why didn't that happen?
It never could have. You know, and we knew that. I mean, you and I knew that when we were looking at this issue. At the time, the superintendent was John McCarthy, and he by no means led with the idea that, you know, that budget issues were going to keep cropping up. I mean, that would have been a poison pill to, you know, have a big presentation saying all the problems first. So, I mean, certainly it was in his interest, it was in the district's interest to talk about the benefits of regionalization. But I have to admit, he always took a moment to mention that this was not, his term was a panacea. That, you know, he would say that in each of these presentations, that you're not looking at a budget panacea, this is not going to solve all problems. And he was right. You know, Mr. Lombardi over on the Freetown FinCom at the time was saying the same thing. He was saying, you know, I don't see sustainability here. I see maybe first-year benefits. There were lots of people on all sides, you and myself included, who saw problems in the future. So if we thought that just regionalizing, is that a correct word?
Yeah, I think so.
Did I say it right?
Yeah.
If we thought that that was going to solve all of our problems, then we were kind of kidding ourselves. But on top of that, another complicating factor is that Lakeville's revenues have just been flat. Business growth hasn't been large. Again, I mentioned earlier, you know, Cisco on itself wouldn't have been a solution, and you know, there were a lot of issues there, and the town decided to take a certain path. You know, that probably would have been beneficial to the town and the school district if Cisco had come in, but there would have been other things that came with it. So the town decided what to do, you know, about that, and they decided to stick more with a residential tax base. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been much business growth since then. If we make those kind of decisions in a difficult economy anyhow, and our tax revenues are very flat, then
We have to live with
it's going to stack up after a
consequences.
while,
Right.
you know, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. It's not anybody's fault. I mean, I moved into Lakeville 6 years ago. One thing that I really liked about Lakeville is it reminded me of Mansfield, Massachusetts when I grew up as a kid. It's about the same size now as Mansfield was when I was, it wasn't my only reason for moving here.
Sure.
But it's a nice town. It's small enough, it's not too big and all of these things. But we certainly don't have a very dynamic tax base. And right now the pressure is on our residential tax base. There's no doubt about it. And it's not with any happiness that I'm supporting this override. And it's not just because I'm a school committee member, and it's not just because I'm a parent of kids in the district. It's probably because of all of those things. But it's because we either have to go forwards or we have to go backwards at this point. And our tax base isn't going to move forwards this year in step with us, as is. It just isn't. So we either have to scale back, you know, entirely, town and schools, and be less than we want to be, or we have to move forward and we have to make an adjustment. I think of it as less of an override than as making an adjustment to the whole, you know, regionalizing, which did increase our costs to the district. We saw that coming as well, and that the economy has not picked up over the last several years. You know, something that whole living within our means kind of thing. We have to learn what that means. We either have to truly live within our means, which is going to mean going without some things in our school district and probably our towns too, where the school district is not going to magically, you know, solve its problems this time. Or we're going to continue to move forward. That's my view of it anyhow. Long answer, my apologies.
What if Lakeville passes the override? Freetown doesn't have one scheduled. How would they fund the money needed?
Yeah. See, I'm no, I don't know all of Freetown's finances, but in rough terms, it seems that Freetown has done a little bit better pulling out of this economy. They've got a little bit more, you know, tax base, and they've come into a position where they had a choice. I mean, it's not like they had just oodles of money laying around, and this was not of a concern to them. But they had the ability to either schedule their own override, or if Lakeville does pass an override, they do have the ability, you know, in their town funding, to, to fulfill their obligation.
In the town, so you're talking about stabilization reserve, et cetera, that sort of thing?
And in their very tax base, I mean, they're in better shape right now than Lakeville is financially. They don't want to push Lakeville. I mean, they're not stepping forward and saying, we're going to fund,
Right.
to a certain amount, and therefore Lakeville has to, proportionately. They don't want to push us. And they also don't want to get into a joint town meeting and all of the turmoil that would create by if Lakeville passes and then they say, no, we don't want any part of it.
Right.
So Freetown has signaled that they'll do their part if we do our part. And they don't need an override in order to do it. And, that's good for them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
that's-
Well, that answers the question, thank you. Dr. Heisinger, if there is no override, no new funding and so forth, what will our schools look like?
So at the last school committee meeting, we talked about two scenarios. The first scenario would be 59.9 staff cuts, which would mean class sizes K to 8, anywhere between 30 and 38. At the high school, it would be anywhere between 30 and 38, possibly even bigger in some specials. We would have no library services for kids K to 8. The only reason we would have it at the high school is to maintain our accreditation. It will put our accreditation at risk because we will be cutting AP courses, we'll be cutting elective courses. It will be an utter decimation of our school system that will take these communities a decade to rebuild.
I've heard this talked about before in previous years, putting accreditation at risk. What real risk is that for a student leaving a high school that isn't accredited?
Colleges will not look at students seriously who do not come from accredited high schools. So why would a parent move to this district? Why would a parent keep their children here with this in the district if their children would be at risk for losing out on opportunities to go to college? And then they would have to send them to private school. So many things I've said to parents is, here's an amount of money that you would pay for an override for public education, but you'll spend tens and thousands of dollars to send your kids to private school, which is unfortunate and unnecessary. So we really are at risk. We're at a turning point in our district, and a sad turning point because we've seen our scores higher than they've ever been across the district. Our literacy scores are higher than they've ever been across the district. More kids are reading at grade level at the elementary schools than has been in the time that they've kept data in this district. The results are excellent, and that's a real credit to our teachers and our administrative staff. So a lot of great things are happening, and I would hate for us to take a wrong path and lose the momentum that's been happening.
That was going to be my next question, the progress that has been made.
The progress has been significant. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed has come and has commented that they've not seen a turnaround like this quickly in any level 3 or level 4 districts. We're making great gains, and people are taking notice of that, which I think is, again, a great testament to the staff of the Freetown Lakeville Regional Schools. So that's scenario A, 59.9 staff cuts, just a significant hit. I mean, kids are going to be basically housed in classrooms, and it'll be babysitting them all day. There will not be a whole lot of learning going on, and special education costs are going to begin to go back up. We've cut them 6% in the last 2.5 years, which is significant. Over 100 less students.
I'm sorry, what was that percent again?
6%. Over 100 less students we have in special education than we did 2.5 years ago, which is excellent. The scenario B was also discussed at this last school committee meeting, which includes closing a school building. Also outsourcing custodial services, which has been a topic over the last few years. Raising fees for extracurricular activities. So we already pay hundreds of dollars to play athletics, and now we'll have to charge for students to simply be in clubs, which also is looked at by colleges. What type of clubs are you a part of? How do you integrate into your school community? So this also is going to impact many parents. So there's been a variety of different scenarios that have been looked at by the regional school committee, and they're going to have to make that decision if this fails. But again, it goes further than just the schools. This is also then going to affect the town side because of the net minimum requirement. And that number, 59.9, is at the base level. Net minimum is 488,000 less than that. So I'm still going to have to cut 10 more teachers. So you're looking at almost 70 teachers, or staff, teachers and staff, that will be cut if we get funded at net minimum.
Okay, well, you've kind of answered this next question, but I want to throw it out there anyway in case there's anything else you want to throw in. You've talked about what we might lose if it doesn't pass. What will we get if the override is passed? Would all of those things that you were talking about losing automatically be there, or any additional things that we might get if it does pass?
Right, so if it does get passed, we're going to have lower class sizes than we have this year. So the average class size in the elementary will be 20 to 23. This year they're 25, 26, kind of teetering above what we really wanted that low class size to be. We will have class sizes of no higher than 28 at the middle school, no higher than 28 at the high school. These are reasonable class sizes for secondary. We will have technology support for teachers. We will have coordination for teachers. We get a lot of bang for our buck in this budget. And even yesterday at the override meeting, there was teachers from Middleborough who had talked about how important it was to them in their practice this year that they had been restored some direction, some coordination. It helped bring teachers together to collaborate, and the morale went up. So I think you're going to have manageable class sizes, you're going to have more supports for teachers, you're going to have proper intervention supports for students so that we can be preventative with kids before the gaps grow so big that they need special education costs. We're going to continue to chip away at those special education numbers so that we can save money. Hopefully build programs to bring students in district and save some money there by continuing to build a robust instructional program here in Freetown and Lakeville. There is a lot of great things to be gained from investing in this override and in these schools.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Dave, do you have?
Sure, I'll throw it.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to see those things as well, but there's a couple of other things that that I'd like to see. I mean, how quickly we can get there, I don't know. But one thing that was interesting is that the Lakeville Board of Selectmen sent us a letter. The budget, if the override passes, will be slightly over $33 million and about $95,000. They sent us a letter requesting or urging us that $95,000 be set aside for our critical capital needs, like the vehicles we were talking about and whatnot. Now, the selectmen went so far as to move forward and have the ballot vote, as an opportunity. They haven't really taken a position or endorsed the situation one way or another. Scott Belleville has done a lot of work to get us to the point where we are, certainly. But when I read that letter, what I got out of that letter, and I was in full agreement with it, but I saw in that they do kind of understand, because I think they know that we don't have that extra money. Going back to that slush fund question and all of those sorts of things, we just don't have those options laying around here right now, and so it motivated them to send that communication to us to please set aside a little to take care of a few of these things, and I want to see a guy like Bob Souza have it a little bit easier. And have a little bit more resources to, take care of some of the things here in the district. Not that this district is unsafe or unkept. He does a great job. But, when you're at a point where all your vehicles are disabled and you can't plow out in that storm and you have to get bailed out by the town of Lakeville, it kind of sends a signal.
Sure.
We set aside small amounts of money last year to repair the tennis courts, to paint the tennis courts, and there's a crack about this wide running down the entire court. Grass grows through it. If it's not clipped away, it gets up this high. I took a picture of it last year. And also the track. The track needs to be painted. It's starting, the asphalt is starting to chip away at the edges. and the paint is practically gone. You know, those two things are also used by the community a lot. I would say over the course of a year, you know, people, you know, just walking on the track and
Right.
using the tennis courts recreationally, overall, they're probably used more by the community than by the schools, you know,
Mhm.
for sporting events. And we didn't use that money to fix those courts. You know, I just saw that this spring, and, you know, it kind of bothered me. I was asking Jessica just a few days ago, how come this isn't
Right.
happening? Well, it's because we're watching every penny right now. And this year, we had to resolve the cloudiness in the water, and we
Right.
had to get the filtration system. And, you know, that just took every bit of resource that you could out of maintenance. And again, the small amounts of money, I think it was $15,000 combined to fix those two items, about half, you know, for each project. That had to be put on hold. And so we're 1 year closer to the time that Jim Cavusio was talking about, when the tennis court won't just be able to be repaired and repainted, it'll have to be resurfaced.
Right.
And we're one step closer to the track being, you know, instead of being repainted, you know, being resurfaced. And those are multi-$100,000 projects for
Right.
each of those. And
For which we have nothing in the budget
Oh, no.
presently that even begins to address that.
no, we don't have any kind of, you know, seed fund. We don't have any dormant fund that's laying around to do a project like that. We don't have any of that. I wish we did. You know, I wish it was easier, and I wish we weren't having this interview, truly.
Right.
It's not with any great comfort that I sit with you here today, or ask for the taxpayers of Lakeville to do this, because, you know, we went through the average and on average $300. You know, $300 is a lot of money. I'm not saying that it isn't, and I don't want to take $300 from somebody without having a very good reason to do it,
Right.
and to be able to say to that person, here's what you're going to get in return. And, you know, the upkeep, the pride in the district, the direct services to the students, those are all things that I'm keeping in mind. And some of those small things that I just mentioned, we can't do them. And we're creeping closer to the day where small dollars become big dollars, or we just don't have a track. You know, or, you know, the tennis court's closed down. You know, or, you know, both of my kids are avid swimmers. God forbid we close the pool, which is you know, very near and dear to me. If we keep putting off because we just don't have the ability to even approach some of these things, you know, eventually we're going to be saying, nope, we don't have
Right.
that anymore.
Right.
And, you know, where do we send our track team?
If I could just say one
Sure.
last thing, kind of to close up tonight. You know, I know that there's people out there that probably have these debates back and forth. There's compelling reasons on both sides, right? So there's reasons certain people have to say no, and there are reasons that people have to say yes. But when you look at the arguments at face value, even the compelling argument to vote yes is so much greater than the argument to vote no at the point that we are at as a town. It is, for a variety of reasons, whether you have students in school or you don't have or you have students in school. The reason to vote yes is so much more compelling, and the result of voting no is going to be tragic on so many different levels, for so many different families, for children, for the community at large, because even if it goes down this year, it's going to be needed even more so next year, and the costs will continue to grow, and the causality will be greater and greater and greater. So I ask people to think about that. You know, you may not like everything about it, but the alternate, is it really worth it? And picking up the pieces afterwards, is that going to be worse than going maybe in another direction?
One thing I did want to pick up on, and I don't want it to be missed here, you did mention the Board of Selectmen, and we mentioned earlier about how much they participated in this whole process this year, and if we truly believe in education, I know that we do here, I have to really give kudos to the Board of Selectmen for their participation and their education, and for, regardless of whether they're for or against it, I don't even know, but regardless, they did at least listen to the people that I know who were talking to them and ask them to put it on the ballot and let the people decide. And I think they deserve a lot of congratulations for doing that.
We've
ahead.
like we said earlier, we've had a lot of contact with, Derek also earlier in the year, but, John Powderly and Scott Belleville have spent a lot of time here. Scott is also on the regional finance, or was last year. I don't know if he'll take on that role this year. We've benefited greatly. Hasn't always been fun, I mean, they've had some properly placed, tough criticisms, asked a lot of questions, and we're learning that there are things that we could do better, differently through some of that. I mean, we've learned that our financial, software, business systems are completely different. It seems like Lakeville has better abilities if they want reporting on certain financial data. They've got a better ability to obtain that than the district, right? But that's not something you can solve today.
Right.
But we're Scott's
but you can move in that direction.
Right. Scott would ask a question like, how come you can't produce this? Like, if I go into the town and say I need to know this, it's a couple of push buttons. How come? And our software is different. Our systems are different.
Right.
And those kind of conversations are going to lead to improvements down the line. So
Indeed.
you're right. And Scott did a lot of work. Crunching numbers and supporting, he made the presentation that eventually became the selectmen voting, to move forward with a ballot vote.
Right.
So, yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you for coming out this afternoon and presenting this information to the people. And Dr. Heisinger, I thank you for being here and contributing as well. This is all very important information, regardless of how folks vote. I do want to repeat a notice to anybody. If you have anything that you would like to add to this discussion, this argument, whether you're in favor or against, please contact us at LakeCAM.tv or at 774-213-9594. Thank you very much for watching.